सॉरी यार, मुझे ही लड्डू नहीं मिला।
खास चीजें हो या इन्वेस्टमेंट, अलग अलग जगहों पर रखने में ही समझदारी है। इसीलिए म्यूचुअल फंड्स या आपके पैसों को अलग अलग जगहों पर इन्वेस्ट कर मार्केट के रिस्क को कम करते हैं। म्यूचुअल फंड, सेविंग का नया तरीका। म्यूचुअल फंड निवेश बाजार जोखिमों के अधीन है। योजना से जुड़े सभी दस्तावेजों को ध्यान से पढ़ें।
He is one of the iconic voices in the game.
And then I said to myself, and now you just put your own stamp on the game.
Along with the likes of Richie Benaud, Bill Lawry and Tony Greig, Ian Chappell formed the most celebrated cricket commentary team in television.
Ian, how then do you explain what happened to me at the ground?
On the show today, tales from the commentary box after 4 decades of calling the game. The art of cricket broadcasting in the words of one of its finest practitioners. Thank you so much for sparing the time to do this, Ian.
Pleasure, Gaurav.
When did the first sort of seed get planted in your head that this could be a life beyond the game?
Well, I don't know. My mother always says that I wanted to be a bus driver when I was a kid, but all the time that I played in the backyard when I was on my own, and that was for a few years before Greg came along, I would, I'd be throwing the ball against the wall, hitting it, and the whole time I'd commentate. Also, my grandfather, Vic Richardson, who, we've got a lot in common. We're similar sort of build, I think, in a lot of ways, a similar sort of personalities. And Vic, after he stopped playing, he wrote on both cricket and football in Adelaide and broadcasted radio. He was basically before television. My first, as captain, and it's very good training actually for being a broadcaster, because you're obviously doing a lot of interviews, so you get used to that. But then it's a little bit different when it's not an interview and you're having to come up with the thoughts. But doing a lot of interviews as captain was very good training for a life in broadcasting. And being in Adelaide, and Adelaide a fairly small city, and being captain of Australia, it was a big thing to South Australia to have the captain of Australia. So I was doing a bit of television work there, but again, it was mainly being interviewed. And then I also did a radio program with 5AD, who, again, my grandfather had worked for earlier. And so we did a sports program, we do a Saturday morning sports program. So that's sort of how I got into writing and broadcasting. But it was no grand plan, it just sort of evolved.
The Packer years, and I guess you will get, you've been asked about this a lot, but did the mindset change as cricketers, also as broadcasters, that you were not just part of a game now, but a larger entertainment product? Did that ever come into your mind? Was that ever part of the whole ecosystem that was built by that Packer revolution?
I think it became obvious fairly quickly, probably while I was still playing World Series cricket, and then I had one more season, with the compromise. It became pretty obvious before, when the ABC were covering cricket. It could have been two little ants out there. It was shot as though it was on a Polaroid, and it was shot from one end the whole time. So you didn't really know the people as characters, but under Kerry and Channel 9, David Hill and Brian Morelli did a lot of good things with the coverage. You sort of got in close and you saw the faces of the players and you saw the tension. They were very big on if the match was close or someone was getting close to a century, they'd always get in right tight on the guy's face or on the bowler's face, and they were switching between the bowler and the batsman. And suddenly the players were being used to promote the game. It was young David Hooks coming. So David Hooks, I'm sure, attracted a lot of the younger people. Hooksy had long blonde hair. I think he attracted a lot of young female attention. So they used that to attract people to the ground. So it became fairly obvious fairly quickly that suddenly the players became characters and better known amongst the public. You've got a couple of ways of getting people to keep watching the television. You know, you can say, this is really going to be interesting. Well, if I'm sitting at home watching a sporting event at home and some commentator says, this is going to be really interesting, I probably yell at the television set and say, listen, mate, I'll decide whether it's interesting or not. You just tell me about it. But if you, let's say you've got Sachin Tendulkar batting and you've got Glenn McGrath bowling, and you as a commentator you say, look, I think what Glenn McGrath is trying to do here to get rid of Sachin Tendulkar is he's going to bowl 3 or 4 of his stock deliveries and then he's going to try and give him a quicker bouncer, and that's why he's moved the fine leg a little bit wider. By doing that, you know, the guy at home thinks, this is interesting. I wonder if this is going to happen. And you give him a reason to stay a little bit longer. And when it doesn't happen, he probably sits at home and says, that chap was a bloody idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But, you know, to me, that's a much more subtle way of trying to make the game interesting.
Let's go back to the journey a little bit. Now here you are finishing your career, and it sort of comes together at the same time as television in Australia starts to rise. Can you recall those days going into the commentary box? Was it a smooth transition for you, player to commentator?
I got really lucky, actually, because when I finished my career, in fact, I played a Shield game. We finished the Shield game, last game of the season. That night at midnight I got in my car and I drove to Sydney. It was nothing to do with broadcasting. I was chasing after an attractive young blonde and fortunately that attractive young blonde's been my wife now for 33, 34 years. But you know, I was going up there to live with Barbara Ann, and it just happened to be the right time when you know, I happened to be in the right place at the right time. Sydney was the right place. Obviously, I had a bit of an inside running, having played for Kerry Packer. You know, I'd done a bit of broadcasting with the BBC, and I had a bit of an experience there because Headingley, they used to do the interviews like in the tea break. They would do them on the balcony, on the players' balcony. So you're basically outside the dressing rooms. And I've done this interview, and Ashley Mallett wasn't on the tour. I can't remember exactly why. I think he just hadn't been selected, which to me was ridiculous, non-selection. Kerry O'Keefe was in the team, and I obviously must have in that interview said something about Mallett. Anyhow, he's come, as I'm finishing the interview and about to leave, he's come, oh, Mallett this and Mallett that, you know, and bloody Mallett. And I said, Kerry, 2 things. I said, if you don't like what I'm saying, there's a switch there with a V, starts with a V, you can just turn it like that and you don't hear anything. And I said, if that's not good enough for you, there's another one with OFF on it, and you just go bang and you stop it and you won't hear anything, you know. So that was an early experience. So by the time I started full-time as a cricket commentator with Channel 9, I'd had a bit of experience. But there's always, I mean, people see a television studio and they think, oh, it's very glamorous and so on. When they actually come in the commentary box, they say, oh, crikey, it's a mess, isn't it? You know, because there's wires everywhere, and you know, I mean, what you see on television looks terrific, but down below is a mess. But I'll never forget, and this is one of the reasons why Richie was so good. I think this was like my first year. And we had this Wide World of Sports logo behind Richie, you see, and Richie's in his light coloured jacket doing the tea break stuff, and immaculate as always. And suddenly, boom, the set has fallen forward and hits Richie back of the head, sort of back of the shoulder.
On a live shot?
Oh yeah, no, he's taught in the middle of a sentence. But typical Benno doesn't even miss a word, anything. I mean, if it had been me, heaven knows what might have come out. But, Richie just kept going, didn't make a mistake with his sentence, and he's just sort of pushed back a little bit with his shoulders and pushed the thing back a little bit. The same time as that happens, his bloody alarm on his watch goes off, you see. So once again, without missing a beat, he just reaches down, boom, turns the alarm off. And the people at home wouldn't have known that anything had gone wrong, but things always go wrong in television. But that's why Richie was such a good presenter, because the people at home never knew what was going wrong with Richie, because he never missed a beat.
Now you've got the girl, you've got the job in Sydney, everything's looking good. This iconic team starts to come together. That still gets talked about. Chappell, Laurie, Benno, Tony Greig. Can you remember how that was that just an accident that the four of you came together and became this iconic team, or was there a lot of thought applied to a certain kind of commentators being built at Channel 9?
Well, I've never actually asked David Hill about it, but Hilly was a very, very smart television person, and I would imagine he put a bit of thought into it. He always talked about having a variety in commentary and in commentators, and I think that was one of the reasons why that group worked together, because we were all very different. And different voices. He always thought different voices was important. Bill was always getting excited. I think Tony and Bill, well, I don't think, I know that they sort of got together and thought and said, right, if we have a bit of an argument, stroke disagreement every now and again, that won't hurt. I think that Tony also, because he was seen as an outsider by Australians, having been an English player, an English captain, and having been booed at probably most of the Australian grounds, I think he thought, right, that's something I can make work for me, so I'll take whatever team's touring Australia, I'll sort of take their side, and that'll just add to the it'll create some disagreement sort of thing. It'll give the Australian public a reason to dislike me or whatever. So I think Tony made a decision. I watched Richie. I learnt a lot of things from Richie. But to me, it's like captaincy. When I took over the job as Australian captain, I sat down and I wrote down. I played under three captains, two Australian, Simpson and then Laurie, and one South Australian, Les Favell. And I sat down on this side of the paper and I wrote all the things that I liked about their captaincy. On this side of the paper I wrote down all the things that I didn't like. So I then tried to obviously do the things that I liked. I tried not to do the things that I disliked, because I figured that if I disliked them, probably most players would dislike them. And then I said to myself, and now you just put your own stamp on the game. So whilst I watched not only Richie, I watched a few things other people did, but mainly Richie, it had to be my personality, not... a lot of people, for some reason or other, I don't know why, and even like Dennis Early said to me, mate, you're copying Richie Benaud, you're becoming another Richie Benaud. I said, mate, I'm never going to be another Richie Benaud. There's a very funny story, actually. This is 76-7 when I'm working for the O10 network. And one night I'm in the bar with Richie having a beer, and Rich says, the look goes out to Ian, there's a better way, And I thought, he's going to tell me some things about broadcasting, you see. And I said, what do you mean, Rich? And he said, you don't have to tell every pest to piss off, you see. And I said, but Rich, it gives me a bit of satisfaction every now and again to tell some pest where to go, And that was it, Richie, and he wasn't, it's one of the rare pieces of advice that he's offered. If I ask him questions, he would always give me thoughts. Anyhow, next day we're at the cricket ground, and I must have been feeling magnanimous or something, but I've agreed to this interview, this invitation to go to lunch with the administrators. I don't know why I've agreed to that, but anyhow, at the Adelaide Oval it was, and so I've gone down to go to lunch with these administrators. I walked through the door, and the first guy I run into is a guy who was a school teacher at the college I went to, you see. And I didn't get on with this guy. I didn't like the guy very much, and I don't think he liked me very much. And he was the coach of the first 11 when I played my first season. Fortunately, he moved on, and the guy I had after that was terrific. But Bill Leake, I didn't like Bill at all. As I say, I don't think he liked me. I'd had some trouble which had been reported as being a strike by the South Australian players the season before. And he'd written me this scathing letter, you know, saying, here I am, I'm a school teacher, I'm trying to teach young kids how to behave properly and you're carrying on like this, you're a disgrace, your behaviour's terrible, why don't you retire? See, so I walk in and boom, first guy I see is Bill Leake. So I got no idea why I did this, but I walked over, patted him on the back, said, Bill, haven't seen you for ages. I said, thank you very much for that lovely letter you sent me. See, off I go. Sitting down, I'm thinking, Richie's right, there is a better way. You know, that felt good because now he's got to explain to all these people that he's got at his table. Anyhow, go back to the commentary box and Richie and I are not working together, so I don't get an opportunity to tell him. He goes off for a drink with a mate of his at the cricket ground, so it's later before I run into him at the bar at the hotel, you see, and he comes in, can't wait to tell him. I said, Rich, you're right, there is a better way. Ian, how then do you explain what happened to me at the ground after play? I said, why, what happened, Rich? He said, well, I've gone in the bar to have a drink with my mate, and he said, I've just had the first sip of white wine, and this bloke comes up and he says, Richie Benaud, he says, you don't remember me, do you? And I said, I had another sip of my beer, and my wine, and I said, just give me a second, it'll come to me, it'll come to me. Had a sip, and the guy's going, no, just give it a second, it'll come to me. Has another sip, and the guy, he can't wait to tell Richie who he is, you see. No, give me a chance. He said, I'm Ron Cooper. And Richie said, well, why don't you F off then? So, you know, it was a hell of a lot of fun.
Did you form friendships with all of them off your working hours? Obviously, Richie Benaud sounds like a mentor and someone you greatly admired. Yeah. But with Tony Greig and Bill Lawry, who were contemporaries in that sense, you must have played cricket a lot with them and being in the box with them. Were friendships away from the box important? Yeah,
I mean, I'd played under Bill. I was vice-captain to Bill when he was captain. Now, Bill and I are, you know, a North Pole, South Pole. We are totally the opposite. I mean, Bill's a non-drinker. He hates sort of going out late at night. I've seen Bill Lawry as a player not out at 6 o'clock at stumps. He's showered and gone by 6:10. I mean, 2 hours, I'd still be sitting there in my shirt and probably a towel around. I got rid of my creams, but I needed to, you know, relax and come down after a game, particularly when I was captain, but pretty well always. So we definitely North and South Pole, but we always got on well together. Bill and I guess we're similar in that you know where you stand. You know, I always knew where I stood with Bill, and I think he always knew where he stood with me. And you know, that didn't mean that we agreed all the time, but you know, we'd have our disagreement, and boom, then you just move on. And Bill's like that. He just okay. That was then. We've had that disagreement. Now we move on. It didn't fester with Bill, so we've always got on well together. And I roomed with him once, actually in India, in Pune. They didn't have we were at the Turf Club Hotel in Pune in 1969, and they didn't have enough rooms for the captain and the vice-captain to have a single room. And I've roomed with Bill. It was one of the funniest nights I've ever had. He was telling me all these stories about his first tour to England in 1961. I was wetting myself laughing. He's a very funny man, Bill. And so, you know, I always enjoyed his company. But I wouldn't say we're best friends. But a couple of times I've been asked to, they named a stand, I think it was, after him at North Cricket Ground, and I was honoured to go and make the speech for the opening for Bill. I introduced him when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I got a phone call I got a card from Joy, his wife, thanking me very much for what I'd said about Bill. So, we've always had that relationship. Tony and I admired Tony when he was playing for England. I respected him as a cricketer who got the absolute best out of his ability. But I must say I lost a bit of respect for him during World Series cricket for a number of reasons. And so for a little while that animosity, certainly from my side, still came through once we were commentating together. And I think after a little while I thought to myself, Ian, what's this all about? You're obviously, we're going to be working together, could be for quite a long time. This is pretty pointless. So, I would never say that I was a friend of Tony Greig's, but we always got on quite well. And he was damn good company. You go out I remember one of the last evenings I had with him. We were in Colombo. It must have been during the, can't remember now. I think it was probably the World Cup. It was either the World Cup or the T20 World event, one of the two. And we were staying at the hotel in Colombo, and it was some sort of holiday, and we couldn't get any alcohol. So, you know, well, an Australian, he's whatever he is, English, South African, whatever. We're pretty inventive when it comes to finding alcohol. We found some, but they told us, I think we had some of our own, but they told us that we had to sort of sit in a dark corner around the pool where we wouldn't be seen, but we could drink our alcohol there. And Tony was, by that stage, he was having a cigar. And I always liked cigars. I preferred cigars. Didn't have them very often. You know, I probably have one every 3 years. And I'm sitting there with Greggy and we're having a glass of red, and he said, "Would you like a cigar?" And I thought, yeah, I do. We had a cigar. And not long after that, we're back home, and I got the message that Tony had cancer, you know, and the news wasn't very good. So I rang him up and I said, "Jesus, mate, I hope that wasn't a bad batch of cigars you had in Colombo, was it?" And, you know, I guess that's the Australian way, you know, when things are bad, sort of the black humour comes out. And anyhow, he laughed about it. And then the other thing was he always drove the car to commentary. You know, Bill would be in the navigator's seat, and myself and whoever in the back. Richie was always in the back, but Greggy always drove. He loved driving.
And he had a use for the key of the car as well.
Oh yeah, that's right, for the pitch. Yeah.
Yes.
So this year that when he's ill and he's not commentating with us, first Test match as always in Brisbane, 8 o'clock. You know, leave to go to the ground. You see, and Bill and I are standing there waiting for the car to come around. I forget who was going to drive on that occasion. But anyhow, we're waiting for the car to come, and I suddenly thought, Greggy. So I ring Tony's mobile, and he picks up the phone. I said, "Greggy, where are you? The car's here. Where are you?" And he was a bit confused. He said, what the hell are you talking about? I said, "It's Chappelli here. We're waiting for you, the car." And then he laughed and he said, "Oh yeah, mate, I'm sorry I'm not going to be with you, but hopefully soon I'll be with you." And sadly, he never was. And I can hear some commentators actually waiting for the replay to come up before they say something. Now, if you've played 10 or 15 years of international cricket and something's just happened on the field, you should not have to wait for a replay before you say so. You should be able to make some comment and I mean, you don't always know that the replay, you know, what if something goes wrong with the machine downstairs and it doesn't come up? You know, then you know what, are you just going to sit there with nothing? You know, that really annoys me. But it's very boring television when all you hear is just the last ball. You know, the guy talking about the replay, the guy talking, and again, it'll be mostly because he's just talking about what you're seeing, and that's not the art of commentary, telling people what they're seeing.